What happens when a commander ignores a warning, dismisses a threat, and decides to move forward without considering the consequences? The battlefield is unforgiving, and sometimes the price of miscalculation is far higher than anyone could ever imagine. In this story, it wasn't an enemy's bullets, nor the clashing of swords that would seal the fate of hundreds of soldiers. It was a gas attack, an attack that was meant to be deployed on the enemy, but instead it struck its own troops. This mistake would change the course of the battle and send shockwaves throughout the military command. The attack was a failure in more ways than one, but its true horror was not just in the aftermath, but in the fact that it could have been prevented if only someone had listened. Imagine the scene: soldiers preparing for another day of fighting, only to be caught off guard by a lethal substance that lingered in the air, choking their lungs, disorienting them, and leaving them unable to fight or even flee. The soldiers had been warned. They had seen the signs of a mistake waiting to happen, yet the higher-ups decided to disregard them. This is a story of how a warning was ignored and how the gas meant for the enemy found its deadly path back home. How did this happen, and what were the consequences? Is Chicky with me? Because we're about to uncover the shocking details of one of the most disastrous military failures that ever occurred. Now, before we dive deeper into the details of this tragedy, take a moment to like this video if you're shocked by this story. Please leave a comment below if you want to share your thoughts on how a failure like this could happen. And don't forget to subscribe. This is only the beginning of a deep dive into history's most gripping and often ignored moments. Now, let's continue and see how this story unfolds. Imagine a battlefield where gas was seen as nothing more than a tool of desperation, a weapon too grotesque, too feared, too unpredictable to be trusted. For much of military history, chemical weapons were considered a step too far, even for the most brutal of wars. The stigma surrounding chemical warfare was profound, and many high-ranking commanders refused to believe that it could be effective in modern combat. But as the war raged on, the potential of gas as a game-changer could not be ignored. Though initially dismissed as impractical and inhumane, it became evident that the power of chemical weapons was not only in their ability to kill, but also in their ability to terrorize, disrupt, and demoralize entire armies. This particular incident, however, had a different flavor. The chemical weapon wasn't deployed on the enemy as intended to shift the balance in favor of the attacking forces. Instead, it became a lethal mistake, one that was born from an unwillingness to accept the growing power of chemical warfare. Higher command refused to see the undeniable reality. Chemical warfare was real, and it could no longer be ignored. This reluctance to acknowledge chemical weapons was not just about moral hesitation. It was a tactical miscalculation, and the consequences would unfold within hours. A warning had been given a soldier's suspicion that something wasn't quite right. Yet the generals dismissed it, assuming that their way would be the right way. They thought they could control the battlefield and avoid disaster, but what they didn't realize was that they were about to turn their own forces into the very victims of the weapon they'd dismissed. How could such a catastrophic mistake happen? Why was chemical warfare treated as something out of the realm of possibility? And why did commanders turn a blind eye to the warning signs? Stay tuned, because the fallout from this decision was about to become more deadly and widespread than anyone could have imagined. The decision to use chemical warfare wasn't one taken lightly. It was seen as a final resort, a weapon of mass terror, and it had been carefully planned. The gas, a deadly cocktail of chemicals, was supposed to devastate the enemy, incapacitating their forces and leaving them vulnerable. The winds were expected to carry the gas across enemy lines, ensuring that no soldier would escape its reach. But something went horribly wrong. The gas, which was meant to neutralize the opposition, instead turned on its own men. The soldiers on the front lines had no idea what was coming. One moment they were in the trenches, waiting for their next orders. The next, they were choking, gasping for air as their lungs filled with poison. A deadly fog rolled over the battlefield. But instead of finding its target, it crept into the very positions it was supposed to avoid. Imagine the chaos. Soldiers, some of the bravest men, suddenly unable to breathe, their eyes burning from the toxic fumes. The wind had shifted, but it was too late. The military command, who had believed they could control the conditions, watched in horror as their soldiers became the first victims of their own mistake. No plan could have accounted for this. The weapon that had been touted as an advantage had become a devastating trap. The gas didn't just kill or maim, it caused confusion, disarray, and panic. The sound of men crying out for help, the chaos of soldiers running blind in every direction, trying to escape the invisible enemy that was suffocating them, it was a scene that even the most seasoned military officers could not have prepared for. It wasn't just a defeat. It was a devastating betrayal of the men who trusted their leaders to protect them. How could something so meticulously planned go so terribly wrong? And what was the immediate aftermath of this catastrophe? Stay with us, because the consequences of this decision were just beginning to unfold. In the chaos that followed the disastrous gas attack, one soldier stood out, while many of his comrades were disoriented, gasping for breath, and struggling to regain control of the situation. This soldier remained focused. He was not a high-ranking officer or a renowned strategist. He was just a regular soldier. But his belief in the impossible weapon would change everything. This soldier had been mocked for his choice of weapon. His rifle, unlike the standard issue gear given to others, was dismissed as impractical, outdated, and even laughable. The higher-ups had ridiculed him for choosing a weapon that wasn't even military standard. It was a mail-order rifle, a civilian model that many considered ill-suited for the harsh realities of combat. But this soldier refused to listen to the doubters. He believed in his weapon, in its potential, and most importantly, in his own ability to make a difference. When the gas attack turned into a catastrophe, this soldier did not panic. Instead, he relied on his rifle, the one that everyone had mocked, and became the hero who would turn the tide of battle. With a steady hand and unwavering focus, he began picking off enemies with precision, firing from distances that most of his fellow soldiers wouldn't dare attempt. The impossible rifle, once laughed at, now became the instrument of survival and strategy. What was it that made this soldier believe so strongly in his weapon when no one else did? What did he see in his rifle that the others couldn't? This moment would define not only his fate, but the future of the entire battalion. As the situation spiraled, his calm determination became the cornerstone of the higher-ups who had once mocked him were now watching in awe as this soldier proved that belief in the unlikely weapon could change the course of the battle. But how did he manage to outmaneuver his opponents so effectively? What was it about his training or his mindset that allowed him to succeed when others faltered? In war, precision isn't just a virtue, it's a necessity. The difference between life and death often comes down to a matter of inches. The soldier with the impossible rifle didn't just rely on his weapon's power. He relied on his ability to make each shot count. In moments of intense chaos, where every second feels like an eternity, the smallest miscalculation could lead to disaster. For this soldier, the battlefield wasn't just about surviving. It was about mastering the art of timing and precision. He had trained for years, honing his skills, preparing for the moment when everything would come down to one shot, one decision. While his comrades scrambled, blinded by gas and confusion, he remained calm, focused, and dead on target. The importance of timing on the battlefield can't be overstated. A split-second delay, whether in taking a shot or moving into position, could spell the difference between hitting an enemy and being hit yourself. And in that chaotic moment, when gas filled the air and panic threatened to overwhelm everyone, the soldier with the impossible rifle demonstrated what true precision could accomplish. His first shot was decisive. One enemy soldier eliminated with a single round. His second shot followed suit, and as the battle raged on, his rifle became an extension of his own will. Each shot a message to the enemy. No matter the odds, he wasn't backing down. The once dismissed weapon was now a symbol of power, precision, and strategy. But what truly set him apart wasn't just the rifle. It was his ability to control the chaos around him, to remain calm when everything seemed lost. What was going through his mind as he fired those crucial shots? What does it take to stay calm in a situation where every decision could be your last? And how did he maintain the precision necessary to turn the tide of the battle? These are the questions that define the true heroism in war. It's often said that in war, the key to victory lies not in overwhelming force, but in the element of surprise. While many commanders relied on traditional tactics, brute force, overwhelming numbers, and sheer might, this soldier understood something far more valuable: the power of unpredictability. The battlefield is a place where conventional wisdom can often be turned on its head, and what works in theory doesn't always translate to success in reality. The soldier with the impossible rifle didn't just use his weapon to shoot at enemies. He used it to disrupt their expectations, to force them into a position where their own strategies became their downfall. While other commanders believed that battles were won by overwhelming firepower and predictable strategies, he knew that success often came from doing the unexpected. Every time he fired, he wasn't just hitting a target. He was forcing the enemy to adjust their tactics, rethink their approach, and question their assumptions. This soldier had learned one of the most valuable lessons of war: that unpredictability and tactical surprises can often be more powerful than sheer force. De hif e brutritago, once dismissed as a toy, had become an instrument that not only killed but disoriented and demoralized the enemy. When soldiers are faced with the unexpected, when their own strategies are upended, it creates chaos, confusion, and fear. This confusion was exactly what the soldier needed to turn the tide of the battle. But how did this unexpected advantage play out on the battlefield? How did the soldier capitalize on this new approach? And what were the results of his ability to surprise the enemy? The answers might surprise you. In many wars throughout history, the underdog has often emerged victorious, not through strength, but through innovation and adaptability. While the opposing forces relied on tried and true methods, the soldier with the impossible rifle understood that true power wasn't in conformity, but in creative solutions that could outmaneuver and outsmart the enemy. The conventional forces were armed with the best weapons of the time, but they were slow to adapt, slow to embrace change. The impossible rifle, a weapon initially mocked and dismissed, proved that innovation, no matter how unconventional, could defeat even the most powerful forces, while his enemies were bogged down in the limitations of their traditional tactics. This soldier was already thinking several steps ahead, anticipating the movements of his opponents and using his weapon not just to shoot, but to outthink them. Innovation isn't just about new technology or weapons. It's about adapting to circumstances, seeing opportunities where others see obstacles, and using your resources in ways that others never imagined. This soldier used his unorthodox weapon with such skill that it was no longer just a tool of survival. It became the ultimate symbol of how the underdog could defeat even the most well-armed and well-trained forces. It wasn't just about the rifle. It was about the mindset that allowed him to see what others couldn't. What did it take for this soldier to rise above his conventional counterparts? How did his innovative approach to warfare turn the tide of the battle? And how can his story teach us about the power of thinking differently in the face of overwhelming odds? In war, new ideas often face resistance, especially when they challenge long-established doctrines. The higher command, with their experience and authority, had built their strategies around the weapons and tactics they knew best. They had their routines, their preferred methods, and their unwavering belief that what had worked before would continue to work in the future. But when the impossible rifle proved its worth, it highlighted a harsh truth. Military innovation often faces more opposition from its own leadership than from the enemy. At first, the higher-ups were reluctant to accept this new weapon. It didn't fit the mold of what they were used to, and they were hesitant to break from tradition. Their reluctance wasn't just about disbelief in its effectiveness. It was about the fear of disrupting the established order. New weapons, new strategies, they could upset the balance, cause confusion, and, worse, lead to failure if they didn't work as expected. But as the soldier continued to demonstrate the power of his unconventional rifle, the higher-ups began to see the undeniable truth. In war, being too rigid can be a liability. Innovation, even when it doesn't fit the status quo, can lead to victories where conventional methods fall short. The higher command, though slow to recognize it, was forced to admit that sometimes breaking the rules was exactly what was needed to win. This situation reveals a key lesson in military strategy. Leadership is not just about following orders, but about being open to new ideas, even if they challenge the way things have always been done. It's about recognizing when the old methods no longer work and being willing to embrace change, no matter how unconventional it may seem. But how did the higher command finally come to terms with this innovation? What does this say about the relationship between military leaders and the soldiers they command? The answer may surprise you. The gas attack had caused more than just immediate casualties. It left behind a trail of psychological and emotional damage that would haunt the soldiers for years to come. The physical effects of the gas were horrific, enough choking, suffocating, and blinding the victims, but the aftermath of such an event was far more insidious. As the troops stumbled through the aftermath, disoriented and struggling to breathe, it became clear that the true cost of the attack would not only be measured in lives lost, but in the lasting trauma inflicted on the survivors. For many soldiers, the immediate effects of the gas attack were enough to push them to the brink. So many soldiers, unable to get enough oxygen, collapsed, their bodies racked with pain. As their lungs burned, others were left with permanent damage, suffering from breathing difficulties, coughing fits, and a fear of future attacks that would never fully leave them. The psychological toll was just as devastating. Many soldiers were left with a deep sense of betrayal, knowing that their own leaders had allowed this catastrophe to unfold. The command that had been so sure of their plans and strategies now had to reckon with the reality of their decisions. The soldiers who survived the gas attack would have to live with the consequences for the rest of their lives, whether through physical pain, emotional scars, or the guilt of watching comrades fall in an event that could have been prevented. As the dust settled, the true cost of the attack became painfully clear. It was not just a tactical failure, but a deep personal tragedy for every soldier involved. The question now was, how would this event affect the broader course of the war? Would the leadership learn from this failure, or would they continue down the same path, ignoring the lessons of the past? And what of the survivors? What was their fate as they returned to the front lines, knowing that they could no longer trust the very leaders who had sent them into this nightmare? In the aftermath of the gas attack, one undeniable truth became clear. When military command fails to listen to its soldiers, when it ignores warnings and disregards new strategies, the consequences are often catastrophic. This tragic event highlighted the dangers of complacency and rigidity in military thinking. The refusal to consider alternative tactics or to heed the warnings of those on the ground led to a disaster that could have been avoided. This story serves as a powerful reminder that in warfare, the consequences of failing to adapt, to innovate, or to listen to those closest to the battlefield can be dire. The lives lost in this incident were not just the result of a failed tactic, but also of an entrenched belief in the superiority of traditional methods. The reluctance to embrace change, to trust in new ideas, and to acknowledge the realities of modern warfare ultimately cost lives that could have been saved. As we reflect on this event, we must ask ourselves, what can we learn from it? How do we ensure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past? The answer lies in the willingness to listen, to adapt, and to consider new perspectives. In war, as in life, those who are able to evolve, to embrace change, and to recognize the value of innovation are the ones who ultimately succeed. This story isn't just about a failed military strategy. It's about the importance of leadership that is willing to change and grow. It's a call to action for all of us, to question the status quo, to challenge outdated thinking, and to recognize that sometimes the most unexpected solutions can change everything. If you've been moved by this story and the lessons it carries, please make sure to like this video and leave a comment below. Let us know what you think about the military's failure to listen and how it affected the soldiers involved. If you've made it this far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next video. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful, untold stories to light. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to check out the next video on screen. We have more incredible stories waiting for you.